Okay, fantastic. We are now live and 1 minute early as well, which is always a bonus when we can actually get it up and running before time. Normally,
Yeah,
we end up kind of crawling in at like 2 minutes, 3 minutes past,
yeah.
or a little bit. Or I think it's 5:30 in your time, isn't it? Or 4:30, sorry, in your time.
4:30, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so hi everyone. Do let us know in the comments that you can hear us and see us all right, just so we get that feedback to know that we're not broadcasting into kind of nothingness. Um, Very exciting day coming up, or interview coming up today, as we've got the amazing Sindhoor Pangal, who is the director of Barks and a canine behaviourist and does lots of fantastic things. And I think probably the best way to kind of get a bit of an idea about you rather than me trying to remember all the amazing things you do is if you could perhaps just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So, hello, whoever is joining us here. I must say that I know that a lot of you are dealing with the very cold days, but it's quite hot here. It's summer in South India already. We're in the peak of summer, so please excuse me if I look a little flushed. It's not the topic, it's not the conversation. It's quite hot. Um, so, hi, I'm Sindhoor Pangal. I am a canine behavior consultant and a canine myotherapist. I did my myotherapy diploma with Garland in the UK, and I studied with Ture Drogas. Um, I'm currently more of an educator. I'm the director and the principal at Barks. Barks is where we offer a UK accredited level 4 diploma on applied ethology. And uh, applied behavior is not the right word, but the right word is a little daunting. It's what we do is biosocial psychology, which is kind of bringing together the biology, the social aspects of a social being, and the psychological aspects to see what behavior is, and of course, an understanding of ethology. And we also offer a short workshop that kind of introduces you to the Barks way of doing things. What does it really mean to bring in ethology into all of these aspects of an animal? Currently, I'm doing my master's at Exeter in the UK on anthrozoology, which is a offering from the anthropology department. So it's kind of, but bringing in the animal into the conversation. So we look at human-animal entanglements across history, across geographies, across different media, industries, so on and so forth. And that's of a lot of interest for me because I started out with research on free living animals, or animals that I call streeties, and I'm so excited about people using that term. And ethological studies are best done on free living animals. So I was looking at that, and then this kind of master's came my way, and it's excellent because I'm now kind of moving from quantitative number-based research to qualitative research on free living animals. So instead of looking at ethology, I'm looking at a little more of ethnographies and animal biographies and things like that, because I feel like there's so many rich stories to tell about these dogs, these free living dogs, that numbers were very limiting. So I really wanted to bring to you, find effective ways to bring to the world those rich stories that that these animals have. So that's what I currently do.
Fantastic. So quite a few things on your plate at the moment then.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, it's an amazing subject, anthrozoology, isn't it? Because there's so many different ways that you can study it and learn about it, whether you kind of looking at kind of genome level data or looking at kind of more kind of historical data. It's just, I mean, it must be fascinating having that kind of breadth of sources that you can choose from as well. And I also, yeah, I love the fact that you're doing qualitative research. I mean, there's kind of been an attitude, hasn't there, in kind of science, and particularly, I think, recently in kind of some of the more social science regions that I think by trying to almost become very sciencey, very sort of data driven, and shed any sort of idea that they're non-scientific, the qualitative research has been kind of maybe a bit sniffed at, maybe kind of looked down upon, and I think that's really changing recently. I've certainly seen in the dog world, but also kind of things that are coming out in research more generally, which is really nice, because like you say, you do get these beautiful interactions between animals, between humans and animals, between humans and humans, animals and animals, that it's really hard to actually kind of pin down into data points and numbers and quantitative data, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very reductionist. So if we're going to try and put numbers to it, that's literally why I went into the masters, because I'm an engineer, I'm drawn to numbers. And so I tried doing that, and I just could not do justice to what I was seeing in front of me. And it was frustrating for me, because when I tried to give you numbers, and this is kind of an example that I like to talk about, when if you look at ethology, for instance, and you say, what are dogs capable of? And if you say, I want data for it, you're really going to only get the common denominator. You're only going to get what 90% of the dogs do, or, a statistically significant number of the dogs or the population of the dogs do. Whereas when you ask the question, what are humans capable of? Look at the richness we bring in. We are capable of landing on the moon. Not all of us are, not 90%, not even 9%, not even 0.9%, but we are capable of landing on the moon. We are capable of painting the Sistine Chapel. We are capable of, art and architecture and so on and so forth. And I think there's value to finding the common denominator, which is to say, what is a dog physiologically? But there's also much value in asking those sort of deeper questions, and those can only be uncovered by stories. Those those thick descriptions, those really heavy words that we use to describe actions of these dogs, their social interactions. For instance, I watch what's going on out here on the farm between the farm dogs and my dogs, and I've been talking to my professors about it, and I keep telling them, I can't find words other than things like there's politics between them, and they play dirty politics. There's affection, there is love, there is caregiving, but there's also kind of friendships in the true nature of friendships, that changing dynamic of friendships. Friendships are not static. Friendships are not, can you prove that 99% of the dogs form friendships? No. Is that the way human friendships work? No, not really. And sort of the qualitative aspects of friendship, different dogs, different individuals experience and express friendships differently. That kind of a richness can't be brought through with numbers. And if we choose not to look past numbers, we as professionals and people who claim to love dogs, we're shortchanging ourselves. We are not bringing in what is necessary for the discussion. We want to understand these individuals who live in our homes and experience these, wonderful, complicated, messy emotions. And for us to understand it, we can't say that we're going to stop our understanding at what the numbers can tell us. Then we're kind of heading back into kind of this Cartesian idea of reducing animals to machines or automatons. They're not. And we've known that for a long time. But what does it mean to accept that they're not machines? They're sentient beings with a richness of social life. What does that mean? For that, I think we need qualitative studies. And I think studies is also important, because it's not just me telling a story. It's me telling a story with a certain amount of credibility, with backing it with a certain amount of literature, a certain amount of thought process, and reflexivity. I'm bringing in the knowledge that this is a story at the end of the day, and how do I present that in a way that's going to be useful for you? I think that discipline, that academic discipline, is also necessary.
Yeah, I think I completely agree, and I think one thing that occurs to me as well there is when you were talking about that kind of norm, or kind of finding that behavioral norm, is kind of what the function of that is. If you're doing research, you find a behavioral norm, what does that do for carers of dogs and people that are working with dogs, or dogs that don't fit that behavioral norm? Because it kind of starts setting them up as kind of deviating from the norm, or not there being something wrong with them, or there being kind of some sort of pathology with them, if we're talking about a behavior problem potentially. And I think that can not only be problematic in the way we view the dog and the issues that the dog may be having, but also problematic for the caregiver of the dog, because then they might start feeling that there's something, they need something wrong with their dog, they need to fix their dog, but actually their dog may be expressing behavior or sort of existing in a way that is nice and happy and good for them.
Yeah. And isn't that true of humans as well, right? I mean, I think when we start kind of defining these what is considered normal, defining these boxes, and we try shoehorning people into it, it is very, very limiting, and it is exhausting. It's, we feel like we're work in progress. I've seen so many people when I talk to them and their struggles with mental health and things like that, it's always, I'm working on it, it's work in progress. And I feel terrible. I feel tired just looking at them, because I know you've been trying so hard to fit into somebody else's description of what is right. And nobody is looking at you for who you are and what your needs are. And your need as an individual may be very, very different from the entire rest of the world. Who cares? You're still an individual who has needs. And if you're lucky, and I hope each of us are, you're going to find some other individuals to meet that need for you and make your journey through this life a little bit easier, a little bit more pleasant, and in a way that is a little bit more fulfilling for you. And I think we need to do that for ourselves. And really, the message that this message that I carry for dogs, for me, has been a reminder to myself: stop beating myself up. I don't fit into any box. I don't fit into anything. And for a long time, I tried to, see myself as a work in progress, polish, try to get it right. But now I've been reminding myself, be kind on Chiru, be kind on Sindhoor. Both of you, it's okay. Who you are is fine. Just see who can meet your need and how you can meet your own need, and do that for the dogs.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful just to think about and reflect upon yourself, because there's just so much that we see in our human society in terms of expectations of, as you say, fitting someone else's description of what is right. And isn't that, so applicable to dogs as well? Because of course dogs behave in such a way that they really try so hard to fit into a description of what's right so much of the time, don't they? They adapt to us just so incredibly, and then we often turn around and say, actually, that's not enough, or that's not right, or you're getting this wrong. And it's quite sad to think about that. They've done so much in terms of adapting to us, and then we're saying, no, that's not enough.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? And for me, because I have a very cross-cultural exposure, this is a little bit easier for me to understand, and people who have had cross-cultural exposure will understand. When I travel and spend some time in another country, when I spend some time interacting with people of other countries and other cultures, I often find that what they take for granted, what they would think is absolutely the most normal thing to do, isn't for me. And if I have to fit into their world, which I try my best to do when I'm traveling, I try my best to fit into the home of the host that I'm in. And I realize that there's a lot that I have to learn. And there are many boundaries that I cross without realizing it. There are things that I do that I don't mean to. And it's the same is true for people who come into my home. I have a lot of guests who come in from different parts of the world, and I see that they do things that is just not acceptable in my part of the world. But it's not that they're wrong. It's cultural. Now, amongst humans, if we have this, think about it, we're getting another species into our homes, and we have all these rules in our minds of what a domestic animal is supposed to be. And we kind of expect it of them, we push them into it, we force them into it, we shame them into it. We do that with human beings too. But in the process, we're taking away their ability to be their authentic selves. And if we do that, if we're connecting with them as sentient individuals, but we take away their opportunity to be their authentic selves, we are never going to see the best of them. We are never going to experience the absolute best of them. Again, in a relationship, if we're not going to allow that individual to put their best forward, we stand to lose. We stand to miss out on a great opportunity to enjoy this being who can connect with us and add so much richness into our lives. I write about this in my book too. I think the first few years I had Nishi, I was trying to get her to be this and that, and I was fretting and fuming that, she wasn't doing her leash walks well, she wasn't obedient, she wasn't this and that. And then years later, when I changed the way I was thinking about things, and I think one of the very last times that I went out on a vacation with her and my late husband, it's the depth of that experience really is hitting me now. And I remember sitting there and thinking and talking to my husband, and I said, gosh, I lost so many years obsessing over trying to get her to fit. But she's perfect. She's amazing. And I didn't see those things as long as I was trying to get her to fit. I didn't see how good she was with puppies, how good she was with conflict resolution, how good she was with communication with other dogs, and the extraordinary patience that she had. I mean, she had so many qualities. There's a whole book I've written about it. And I couldn't see a lot of that. And I remember having that discussion and, and a tear trickling down my eye and thinking, I lost precious years of a very short life. Now both of them are gone. My husband's gone, Nishi's gone as well. And it hits me even more. And I would appeal to anybody out there who's starting on this journey. If you need to see what is, you need to let go of what you want to see. See what is and appreciate it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's really kind of moving to hear about, to be honest. I think that's so powerful that, the sort of the depth of experience that you kind of go into with that in Dog Nose. I think, it's just so moving to kind of think about that just the importance of appreciating what's there and what you have kind of been gifted with obviously in your case it was Nishi, who sounded like just the loveliest dog and the most sort of kind dog to other dogs, other people. Kind of some of those experiences that you write about with her interacting with other puppies. I think when you fostered a few puppies, right? That's just, it's really, really sort of powerful just to read about. And I think even though actually it's something, when you read that, you think actually we see little things like that a lot in our life. Actually, these things are happening all the time, but we don't always stop to appreciate them.
Yeah.
So it's a good, it's a very, very powerful book all round, I would say, because there's lots of dog books that are written and they're going to give you facts about dogs, but it also kind of makes you rethink things a little bit as well, which is I think what we all need to kind of stop and reflect sometimes on some of those kind of small moments that are really, really powerful. And I think something else, actually, talking of Dog Nose, that I really liked about Dog Nose is kind of your description of your experience of being a new dog owner, because that's something, or dog parent. So I'm so kind of trapped in that language growing up in the UK of saying dog owner. And it's something that I try and change in myself, but it's really hard to change the language that you get used to, isn't it? I don't in my head think that it's the best term, but it's so automatic that I still say it sometimes. But so I think you talk about that kind of experience of being a new pet parent, and I think that's something that we, particularly people in the dog industry, kind of forget what that's like to just really know nothing, really kind of not know what you're doing, not overfeed your dog, do kind of silly things that, I mean, I
Yeah.
remember when I first got my dog, I did, it's kind of, it was a checklist actually. Some of the things you went to, I was like, oh yeah, I did that. I did that. It's like, we all do those just silly things when we first get a dog.
Yeah.
My journey was a little bit more recently. I think I got my first dog in 2018, so not long ago at all, really.
Yeah.
But so going off topics, one thing I did want to ask you about actually that came up or was a thought from me from dog noses is obviously you have entered kind of the kind of the dog care or the dog world, whatever we call it, fairly recently, so sort of 10 plus years ago, not
Yeah, little over 10 years ago. Yeah.
yeah. And obviously Nishi was your first dog, is that right?
As an adult in my own
Yeah.
home, I grew up with dogs, but
Yeah.
as an adult in my own home,
Kind of so as
yeah.
the responsible carer, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Do you think kind of coming in and then obviously very soon kind of in your journey with Nishi, you've kind of got that training with Turid and kind of went into that journey of becoming a behavior professional. Do you think that's kind of helped you in a way in the sense that you haven't got so caught up in any particular strong culture around dogs? So for example, you didn't spend 30 years as someone might have thinking the most important thing in life is heel walking or this or that. Yeah.
I think part of it is that, and part of it is also that, this whole thing happened for me in India, which means that we don't have the whole industry per se is a very nascent industry in India. The idea of training dogs, just 2 generations ago, if I went to my grandparents' home and I said, want to be a dog trainer, they would just laugh at it, saying, you're training a dog to be what? A dog? Like it's not a concept that was understood. So I think I didn't grow up in, though we grew up with dogs around, I didn't grow up in a culture where I saw dogs being sort of molded and fit into, and this is a form of biopower, right? Which is kind of, you will behave the way I want you to behave. And I didn't really see that. I think culturally also, I'm a little bit more used to animals being allowed to be what they want to be. We may like them or we hate them, but we still see them as animals being allowed to be what they are, kind of true to themselves. So I think that also made a difference in that, I wasn't very entrenched in what I had seen. I didn't grow up with these ideas, so it wasn't difficult for me. And I'm very, very glad that I ran into Turid very early on when I needed help for Nishi. I contacted many people, many big names in the industry. And I tried many things, but with Nishi, we were dealing with trauma. And one thing that I realized at that time is trauma, no matter how you look at it, trauma is not something that's going to go away with training. That just didn't make sense to me. I knew that I needed something more than training. A car ran over her face, so she was dealing with a lot. So I think the fact that Turid's idea also appealed to me at that time because she was not really talking about training. She was talking about things that seemed relevant for emotional regulation and emotional recovery. She was talking about communication. She was talking about helping them understanding their emotions. So I think that also was very serendipitous for me. I found the right person, right time, things lined up. And I must give credit where credit's due. My late husband was definitely a very strong influence in my life, and he felt very strongly about this. He felt very strongly about he was madly in love with Nishi, and he could see the bright side of her right from the day one, and he didn't want to change anything about her. He just was smitten by this dog. And I think he came from a strong place of empathy. He connected with her very strongly. So I read about it in the book as well, where I would make calls to him and I was learning with Turid to say, you were right, I was wrong.
Apologize.
Yeah. So I think all those things added up to help me arrive at where I am.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic, and yeah, it's been such a I think fantastic journey that you've kind of shared with us all as well, because so many people now have been able to learn so much from you and your work, and obviously the work you're doing at Box as well. So thank you as well for kind of everything that you brought to the industry.
Pleasure.
And I think one topic that I wanted to touch on today is you mentioned biopower, and I think something, as you're saying, the kind of the cultural view on dogs is very different in India to the UK. So one of the things that I've really learned from a lot of your work, and reassessed from reading and hearing a lot of your work and appearances, is this kind of idea that we have a lot of power over our dogs. We kind of, by nature of our relationship, we have so much power over our dogs, and kind of thinking about how do we handle that? How do we use that? How do we mitigate that as well to help our dogs have as much power and independence as possible?
Yeah. That's a very touchy and a very dicey subject, actually, because the truth is that I think one thing that we do as human beings is we can't help getting drunk on power. It's just, it just happens so quickly and so easily. I try to be very conscious of it, and I see myself still slipping all the time, right? It's the second we realize that you have power on somebody, it's, I think, very tempting to use that. So it could be, and let's just talk about human beings and you'll see how easy it is. The second I realize that you want something from me, there's a pullback. There's almost immediate pullback. You want this from me. So let me, there's my bargaining chip. There's what I can use. What can I use it for? And we don't really think through things. We don't necessarily think it through that way, but it just happens. Maybe it's conditioning. Maybe we have been taught that this is how we survive. I don't know what it is. And the same thing with us dealing with people. Somebody recently said to me, I said, I don't want to get tough on dogs. I never want to get tough on dogs. I always want to have a gentle approach. And he said, well, even with human beings, you balance off toughness with softness, or toughness with gentleness. And I was thinking, well, what are the situations where you get tough on human beings? Only when we have power over people. I don't see too many people getting tough on your boss. The day you get tough on your boss is probably the day he or she is going to fire you. So you find a way to do whatever you have to do as gently as possible. You find a way with your boss, but oftentimes with people who are reporting to you, your people who you have employed, or your children, or if there's a power dynamic with spouses or couples, there is a time that we kind of pull that card. We use that card, that I am irritated with you, I'm annoyed with you, or will you please shut up, when you should actually be saying what's going on. Let's talk about it. So we want to take that shortcut, and we use power when we want to take that shortcut. So now the reason I bring up all these examples is, now imagine a situation where the natural thing in our home with the dog is you have all the power. You control every aspect of a dog's life, from the what the dog eats, where the dog eats, how much, when does the dog go out to pee, pooping, all the biological functions. Where do they sleep? How long can they sleep? All the sort of, the pleasure, the pain, everything. We control everything in their life. So we have an extraordinary amount of power. And so I think the call to us is to really rise above it and become very, very aware that we have this power, and how do we constantly return choices back? What are the places where we can return choices back to the dog? What are the things that they value? Would they like to have an opinion on what they would like to eat? Now, I can't necessarily offer a buffet every day. But when possible, can I give a choice to say this or this? You can have this for breakfast if you pick this. in which case you'll have to have this for dinner because I don't want to throw it away. But at least one meal, you can probably have a choice between A and B. How much do you want to eat? What time? Maybe I can't change my entire day to work around the dog, but can I give a window of 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later? Is that possible? Can I ask the dog which direction they want to walk in? Where do you want to sleep? What kind of surfaces do you want to sleep on? I've seen people work with what kind of a harness do you want to wear today? And dogs seem to have a choice sometimes on those things. And not that it makes a huge difference, but there's that feeling that at least a little bit in control of this body of mine, of what goes in it and on it and where it moves, a little bit of control on this body of mine, a little bit of agency. I think that can go a huge way in improving the emotional health of these family members of ours.
Yeah, and I think that's really nice to kind of get those practical examples as well, because it's not like, and I think perhaps when you hear about these things, you think, oh, this means we have to let our dogs do whatever they want and bend over backwards. But actually, the kind of the things you just mentioned, they're very practical. They're actually, that's not a massive thing to do, but it could make a big difference to your dog's life.
Yeah.
And something that made me think of there as well, when you mentioning the harness, is there's kind of two approaches you could have there, right? If you see a dog that doesn't want to wear their harness, you could say, actually, you know what, we're going to get the clicker out, we're going to train this dog to wear the harness, we're going to reinforce it, we're going to counter condition this harness if there's an aversion to it or whatever. Or you can say, actually, what about one of these harnesses? And it seems to me that, we know that we can, in most cases, counter condition the dog to the harness, and often we'll be able to get that dog to walk really nicely on the harness. But kind of your point raises the question of, actually, is that the best outcome for the dog? And it's, possibly not. Yeah.
And often when you start taking that approach where you're not, and counter conditioning is such a complicated thing, because we know that we can get them to comply. We don't necessarily know that we can change their emotional state. That we don't have evidence of. So let's not, mix the two. And that is the danger, right? That is the danger that you're faced with when you try to counter condition. You really don't know whether whether you're smiling at me because you're happy with me, or you're smiling at me because I've paid you to smile at me, right? So you don't know that. And so you are in dangerous territory. And the reason I'm saying dangerous is now with harnesses, when dogs have kind of pushed back on harnesses, we always do a deep dive. We try to understand what's going on. Many, many times we have discovered that those are some of the first signs that we get of, say, spondylosis. They have a back pain. That's why they're not able to handle the harness. And this could be one of the very early signs. Or they have, they're hypersensitive to touch. They do have some touch sensitivity, or they're suffering from pain in the neck. So that's why they're kind of pushing back on it. Some dogs that are fearful like a tighter harness, whereas some dogs really want something loose and light. In a country like India, first thing that I think of is, what is the temperature? Many of those harnesses are big harnesses, and when they go for a 5-minute walk and come back, and I put a hand inside the harness, I swear I can bake a cookie in there. It's so hot. And we don't think about these things. And it's hard for us to be empathetic about it unless we take a moment to think about it. And I think taking away that kind of a biopower off the table and saying, don't, I'm not going to give myself license to do that. I'm going to try and figure out why this dog is pushing back on this harness. Is there a different kind that I can work with? Frequently gives me clues into something else that's happening with the dog. And that's critical.
Yeah, and I think that's so important as well, isn't it? That kind of using those areas of perhaps kind of conflict, or how you might see them, as information sources as well. Yeah. And kind of thinking, actually, what can we learn about the dog from that? What is the dog trying to communicate with us? And that. So I think so many kind of fascinating topics that you're touching on there. So trying to think where we go next. One thing that I did want to ask you about as well. So we talked a little bit about kind of some methods of restriction within kind of harnesses, collars, and I think that's something that as you say, we often have to use those. We often have to pick out a harness, but I think you've given some great ideas there in terms of how we can offer some more choice in those situations, how we can assess the situation to see actually if there's an underlying reason that we need to address that that dog isn't wearing or isn't wanting to wear a harness. What about other sources of restriction or power that we kind of use over our dogs? I mean, one thing that I did want to touch on today is the use of crates. So I know that's quite an emotive topic within our industry as well. And
I think it's a difficult topic because the second we start kind of going in there, people get very panicky about this tool that they have been using for a long time. Now, it's a tool at the end of the day, much like a harness. It's a tool, much like a leash. It's a tool, and it has its place. There are places where I use crates, especially if air travel is involved or post-surgery convalescence is involved, and the animal should not be moving at all. Then that kind of a confinement is probably necessary. And if I'm not mistaken, air travel is where crates kind of came into the world. Not air travel, just transport. But that apart, I think it should not be a tool that we are using blindly. And I think the reason we should be asking about it is the idea of confining an animal can be very, very stressful for animals that have evolved to move. Movement for animals that have evolved to move, movement is survival. It is an absolute need. It is safety, it is security, it is life itself. And so for any animal that is capable of moving, if we actually put them in a situation where they can't move away, where their movement is restricted, it can make them panic. Because that is the first thing, flight or fight, right? And both involve movement. So that is the very first thing that animals would want to do. Ideally, move away, flight. Ideally, it's really an inelastic need. And so it's really interesting for me because there's like a huge body of evidence. I kind of started researching this to see what is the literature out there in terms of confinement and how does it impact welfare of animals, and how many different animals have these been tested on. And just the volume of literature we got it blew my mind. I was reading it for days on end, and I'll see if I can share some of that literature with you guys.
Is that looking at kind of animals within zoos primarily?
So I think they've looked at lots of contexts, right? We confine animals in a lot of different contexts. So zoos, labs, farms, many different contexts. And what was interesting is many different kinds of animals. In fact, even animals that are used to living in very small confined spaces. So the recent example that I was giving somebody, I found examples of snakes. Snakes live under rocks out here. They live in like tiny little crevices in my wall, and even those animals, when we restrict their movement, when we take that freedom of movement away from them, when we confine them, their welfare drops, stress levels increase. And worse still is when it's solitary confinement, when they're not confined with conspecifics for social animals, and the reverse for solitary animals when they're confined in close proximity where they can sense another member of the species. Both cases, the kind of confinement can cause a huge amount of stress response in their body. And there's evidence with dogs too, which has been kind of looked at in various different contexts. So I think it should not be surprising for us. It should not be surprising for us at all, because even with human beings, think about it. What do we do when there are members of society that we feel we want to punish? We confine them. We put them in jail. And if we want to punish them further, we put them in solitary confinement. So it's more confinement. Like, we know that confinement can be, and this lockdown has taught us all this, confinement, restricting movement can be so stressful on individuals that are designed to move. And so I think we have to keep that in mind when we use a tool like a crate, which is that it is it is a very extreme form of confinement. We're confining them to a very small place. Dogs can go stir crazy even if you lock them inside a home, right? Give them a full home. And that's what happened to us in the lockdown. We had a full home and we were still going nuts. And then imagine putting us in a place where there's just enough room for us to kind of turn around a little bit and or just take 4 steps on the right and 4 steps on the left. So let's not forget that when we use that tool. Let's realize that there's a price that the animals are paying and ask ourselves, what could it be doing to the dogs? Is there another way to handle this? There's also another aspect that I want to touch upon is the way they sleep. Dogs are polyphasic sleepers that need a lot of sleep, and they move between their bouts of sleep throughout the day to different places, and they use the surface that they are on for temperature regulation and giving them the right kind of neck support, back support. So we do a study in Turid's class, and now my students do this as well, where we observe what they do. If you leave them by themselves, what kind of places do they choose to sleep in? And boy, do they move a lot. They want to move from place to place throughout the day for different reasons, different surfaces, and not having that ability to move can drastically reduce the quality of sleep. I think there are studies that have been done on many different animals that show that not feeling safe enough, not having the right temperature, not having the right freedom of movement, these things can impact the quality of sleep. Now here you have it. The quality of sleep drops, they get crabby, they get irritable, they have behavioral problems, and then we're trying our best to train them, and we're confining them more because now they're chewing up and shredding up things. So we want to keep them safe, so we confine them again. We're stuck in a loop. And we have to break out of that loop, and we can't continue to have a blind spot with crates to say, okay, that's one thing that I will not look at and will not question. Try not using it and see the impact that it has on behavior. Give it a month or 2 months, see the impact it has on behavior. Frequently, we see that a lot of these behaviors that are actually a result of poor quality of sleep can get sorted. And then there is also the impact on movement. I'm not very familiar with the impact on, the impact on the spine and the knees. I think Julia from Garland is much well versed with this topic. But I know that when we were having chats, she was talking about this, saying that it does impact their growth, particularly if you do it at a puppy stage and things like that. We don't have enough evidence on that now, but that's a space I would look out for, because it makes sense. It does make sense that if you don't have that ability to move sufficiently, it will impact your growth at the puppy stage. And if geriatric dogs also can struggle a lot. So the jury is out on this in terms of, how it can impact their health. Mental well-being, the jury isn't out on it. There is enough evidence. We must be looking at it. We must use this tool with a lot more caution. It can't be used willy-nilly, no.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And I think that's so well succinct how you've just put that there. I mean, it is a tool that is essentially social isolation. We know is a kind of a primary punisher, right? We are built to most social mammals are built to respond pretty strongly to social isolation, and we know that dogs are the same, probably even possibly more so than us. They are so social. So if we are using a crate, particularly in a condition where a dog's on their own, then there is likely to be some unpleasantness for the animal involved in that. And as well, something that came up to me as well, obviously you're acutely aware of this, telling me how hot it is in where you are today. If you're suddenly confined to a particular space and you can't move to regulate your temperature, God, how are you going to sleep? How are you going to even think about kind of anything? I mean, if I get too hot, if I get too cold, I'm putting on jackets, I'm messing around with the heating, I'm doing all sorts to try and change the temperature. Dogs are more limited than us in what they can do for that.
It's not like we're leaving the remote to the air conditioner next to them for them to that's that's not it, right? And they rely on movement for a lot. They don't have opposable thumbs, so they do rely on movement, and they do rely on their body position in space to work through not just things like temperature, but even what makes you feel safe, what makes you where do you feel comfortable. Chiru, for instance, is, you know, her biggest criteria is being next to people and being next to me. So she's most of the times right next to me, but sometimes she doesn't want to be next to me. She wants space from me. Usually that happens when I'm stressed, when I'm kind of having an argument or I'm crying. She wants to be away from me. But at other times, she wants to be close to me when I'm experiencing emotional distress. And it's not like it's written in a marquee across her forehead, right? It's not like, okay, this is the proximity level that I would appreciate for now. You have to give them that choice. Only then are you going to know what they need. And that can get challenging if you're going to restrict them.
Yeah, it makes it harder, to learn from them and learn what they need, what they want. So that's another really interesting thought on that as well. We've talked sort of about crates kind of in the more general sense, but I suppose what in kind of, you've talked about in kind of airplane transport, perhaps veterinary care as well, often using crates, although actually I have seen some brilliant vets now that have kind of, they set up kind of whole pens for the animals, and I think that's really valuable in terms of looking at how we can just make that experience a little bit more pleasant for a dog, because if you've gone in and had an operation or had something probably quite unpleasant happen, unfortunately, by nature of it, then it's always nice to think about how we can kind of mitigate some of the stresses afterwards. But realistically, obviously, not every vet can afford that. Some are in very small buildings, small locations. So do you think there's anything worth doing in terms of preparing dogs for that experience?
So I think for air travel, of course, yes, we do work with crate training them well in advance, get them prepared for air travel. And as much as the dogs look like they're handling it like, you know, like a boss, they're really good at it. I do see that subsequently, several months later, I get reports back from people who are have a very good eye, often tell me, I kind of feel like they didn't handle it that well. And so that there is that danger that what happens with confinement, and I remember I trapped a mouse in a little cage. I had a mouse in my earlier home, and I trapped the mouse in the cage. And when the mouse got trapped, I expected the mouse to be thrashing about, because the mouse is trapped, the mouse is stressed. I know that. And so I expect the mouse to be thrashing about. But that's not what I saw. The mouse was completely still and just sat in a corner. And I moved the cage and I gave it to the person who was clearing it. And I said, you know, leave the mouse outside. The mouse didn't move for the entire time, looked completely still. And I said, what happened when you left the mouse outside? He said, oh, he just, you know, walked out calmly and ran, once he realized where he was. So there is that freeze response that frequently looks like calmness. I think that's a big danger that we have. And I think looking at the literature, at least, it looks like it's such a huge stressor that I don't think, I mean, we can do some amount of training, but I don't think it's necessarily doing away with the stressors. So I think the bigger question to ask ourselves is, if they are in a situation where they are put in confinement for whatever periods of time, what can we do to help them recover from that? Because it can and is likely to be a very traumatic experience. So what kind of a support can we do for them to recover from it? What can we do during that confinement? For instance, a lot of them can take comfort in the presence of somebody comforting. So if I find, for instance, the few times that I have worked with in shelters where there are very small confined areas where they put the dogs, one of the things that I have done as a volunteer is to go and sit and read to them, and that helps them. It's just they're in a panic state, right? And it's helping them to say, okay, breathe, I'm here, that comforting presence. and the recovery, the recovery after, which is, what do we need to do? Can we kind of do a detox? Can we do a lot of sleep cycles? Can we give you a lot of reassurance that you're now in a space where you're no more confined, you've got your freedom? I would focus more on those rather than trying to see if I can preempt this whole thing and make this somehow pleasant. That's like saying, can I get you trained to appreciate a jail? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd
Oh,
like
yeah,
to
we'd
see
rather
evidence that is
the therapy
possible.
afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's really, and I think, we know that animals, when they're stressed, they're not very good at learning new things. Other than think that things are bad, which they are quite good at learning when they're stressed. They're not very good at recalling memories either. So that however much training you've done, particularly when you've got a new factors, because inevitably you're going to have new factors coming when you're going on a plane, because suddenly there's luggage being thrown around, or there's some scary person in high vis doing weird things, and there's all sorts going on. Or same if you're in the vets or in a shelter. It's going to be hard to simulate that situation, isn't it? And teach a dog that that's okay. And I think, you make a great point in terms of setting up to help the dog recover from that. And perhaps something else as well is thinking about building skills, sort of more general coping skills and resilience skills in advance of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I hear a lot of people say is dogs are den animals. They find it they find it safer in there. And I think that's kind of what we go with. And that's very comforting idea that, they find it safer in there. Couple of things. First up, I have been studying free living dogs for a long time now. There must be about a few million free living dogs in India. If they were den animals, we'd see their dens all over the place, millions of them. We don't. We see them, they do not sleep in den-like structures. But this is very important to understand. They can go in there when they are terrified to the point where they feel there is no option for them to run away and keep themselves safe. So let's say that they have puppies and they know they cannot run away with their puppies and they have to hide. Or when we have fireworks, 5 days of fireworks, they've run helter-skelter, they've run everywhere that they can run, and there is nowhere to run, then they may back off into these hiding spaces. So if a dog is naturally going into these spaces, it really begs the question, what is the state of mind they're in? It's a state of mind where they're terrified and they see no option to run. Otherwise, an animal like a dog, the first thing they want to do is the minute they feel a little afraid, they want to be in a space where they can keep themselves safe. So at a height where they can watch and run away, if possible. Let's see if I can change the angle of this a little bit.
Yeah, got the sun coming in.
The sun's setting on the back and so yeah. So I think that's an important consideration. And if they really were den animals who automatically found it sensible to hide in a cage like structure, we wouldn't need to train them. We wouldn't need to do anything to prepare them. They would happily walk in and they would walk out refreshed and happy. That's not the case. That's why we are even having this discussion, because that is not the case, right? And so I think it's important to understand what state of mind they're likely to be in when they go into a hole. That's why I'm trying to paint you this picture. Keep that in mind when we try to mitigate the effects of this experience that they had, and try to factor that in when you're trying to help them with recovery.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant kind of way of thinking about it. So there's just so much there, isn't there, in terms of the way that the confinement restrictions are put upon our animals. One final thing that occurred to me with crates as well is it's interesting the language that we use around them, and kind of how we've shifted from saying cages to crates, because really crates are kind of what you vegetables come in and stuff, really, isn't it? But it's kind of shifted to that.
It's sanitizing language, isn't it? And again, we're hiding behind words. I'm not so sure that does us any service. It's a confined space at the end of the day. It's a certain amount of cubic area that we're giving them, and again, a lot of these studies don't differentiate between crates and cages. Most of them study the cubic area of confinement, the amount of enrichment, and the social contact they have in there. And we see that the less cubic area you give them, the more stress we see in almost all individuals, almost all species that can move.
Brilliant. Yeah. So it's been brilliant to talk to you today. I'm conscious we're coming to the end of an hour, and I've got so many things I could go to ask you about, but I'll probably keep you here all day. So I think probably best we start wrapping up. The final thing I wanted to, or hope we can touch on is today, obviously, you mentioned that you'd like to make an appeal for the brilliant charity CARE. So I think perhaps if you can, in the last 5 minutes, just can you tell us a little bit about what they do and the work that they've done?
Sure. So I always tell people that when we talk about free living dogs, there's so much we can learn from them. Even today, we have spoken about free living dogs so many times in this conversation, so much we can learn from them. I think whether it be anthropology or anthrozoology, if you're learning from other individuals by observing them, we have to benefit them. And so that's the reason why I appeal to people to support CARE. CARE is an organization that helps with providing medical intervention for free living dogs. I love what Sudha says about CARE. She says, Sudha is the founder of CARE, and she says, I want to make sure that every streetie has access to the quality of medical support that Chiru or Nishi would have. And that's her vision. And I think that's a beautiful one. They provide medical intervention, and then they return the dogs back to where they belong, on the streets as required by the law in this country. And they don't cut corners because these are vulnerable individuals. They just do their best for them and have some of the state-of-the-art medical facilities in there for these animals. So I would appeal to people to please if you've learned anything useful today, then please think of the dogs that helped you arrive at that information and knowledge, and make a little bit of a donation to CARE.
Fantastic. And I've just put the link for CARE as well in the comments. So if you are able to, you can just hop over there, and it's super easy. So you can just go to the donate page I think it's under Help Us or Donate, and they do international donations as well. So it doesn't matter where you're from, you can still, donate nice and easily. So definitely do if you get the chance. It sounds like they make a real difference to dogs' lives, which is great. So once again, thank you so much for coming along and talking today. It's been just so great talking to you and thinking about so many different concepts, but kind of particularly that kind of biopower element, and the control that we do have and the power that we do have over our dogs. The other thing I just wanted to for those that don't know you and want to find out more about you, can you perhaps just share just perhaps a little bit about kind of what you've got going on and what you've got coming up for those that want to learn more from you as well, because I'm sure lots of people do.
Okay, so if you'd like to know more about what I talk about, the easiest way to do it would probably be, I finally managed to remember, this is all flipped to the other side, but this is dog nose, not gob, whatever. So Dog Nose is my book, Learning to Learn from Dogs. It's available internationally. You can pick it up. I also have a short 20-hour workshop, online workshop called Canine Essential 101. You can sign up for that anytime. I can share the link on the comments as well. And we talk about an introduction to the Barks Way, which is introduction to the ideas of biosocial psychology, applied ethology, zoo semiotics, which is how animals communicate with each other and how they communicate with us and how they read our body language, which is going to be the topic of my dissertation this year.
When are you publishing?
Let's see when I get done with it.
Well, good luck with it as well. Hopefully I'll be able to have a read of it if you do get it published.
I'm hoping to get some funds to get a trap camera out here on the tree so that I can watch the dogs communicate with each other and how they respond to us and their social lives. So for people who sign up for Canine Essential 101, we have special access to what we call the Barks Auditorium. We have 2 or 3 live sessions every month, virtual live sessions every month, where we look at these videos from the farm, or we pick up some really contentious, difficult topics, and we kind of pick them apart, and we're quite fearless about that. And we look at ourselves honestly and very reflexively. We bring in a lot of reflexivity into it. So that is also something that people who sign up for Canine Essential 101 can try out. And that's what I have going on. So I have a few snippets of those live sessions on our Barks social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube as well. And we have a website, www.barks.com.
Fantastic. That's Barks with BHARCS.
Yes, that's right.
Great, fantastic. So if you're able to share that in the comments, then that would be amazing. So
Yeah,
I'm sure people will be able to find it. Okay, well, great. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yes, this was I was quite nervous about talking about this because it's a very, very emotive topic. Thank you for creating the space for it. Thank you for hearing me out. We don't have to agree on everything, but just the fact that you even hear me out means a lot to me. And
Yeah.
I hope that it's the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah, and what I would say is the comments, I've been sort of just flicking through them now. You've got some really fantastic comments and some fantastic feedback. So certainly with the listeners,
so I
it
don't
looks
have
like
to
things,
hide.
you don't have to, we're not cancelled. It's all looking okay. Yeah, some really lovely feedback written there. So if you get the chance to have a look at it, it's worth doing, as you got some brilliant feedback about, I think, some people that have done your course as well. So thank you all for coming along, and thank you again, and I'll see you all at the next live. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.